Hello and welcome to the Biological Anthropology lecture series. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Catarrhines. Here we explore what it means to be human, biologically, evolutionarily, and behaviorally. Let's begin our journey into the science of humanity. Welcome to Module 6, Primate and Anthropoid Evolution. Here we trace the origins and diversification of early primates, anthropoids, and Miocene apes. In this module, we're stepping into deep time to follow a story that began more than 60 million years ago, long before humans, long before the great apes, back when the world itself looked very different. In this section, we focus on the rise of anthropoids, from Eosimius to the Fayum primates and early Catarrhines. First, let's revisit what we mean by basal anthropoids. These are the earliest forms that show clear movement toward the lineage that eventually becomes monkeys, apes, and humans. They don't yet look like the anthropoids we're familiar with, but their anatomy hints at important transitions. One of the most intriguing examples is Eosimius from Asia. At just a few ounces in body weight, it might seem insignificant, but its jaw and ankle bones tell us that it was agile, fast, and already showing features associated with later anthropoids. You might wonder why such tiny fossils matter. They matter because they demonstrate that the evolutionary roots of anthropoids may be deeper and more geographically widespread than once thought. Asia, long overlooked in this story, now appears central to the earliest phases of anthropoid evolution. Let's look next at the Fayum Basin in Egypt, a treasure trove of Oligocene primates. This region gives us some of the clearest evidence for early Catarrhines, and it helps connect the dots between small-bodied basal forms like Eosimius and the larger, more derived anthropoids. Among the Fayum primates, the oligopithecids are often considered the most primitive. Their dental and cranial structures preserve traits reminiscent of earlier lineages, while also showing clear steps toward what we see in later monkeys and apes. Think about this as a snapshot of a lineage in transition, still carrying echoes of its ancestors, but moving steadily toward something new. The parapithecids, another major group from the Fayum, highlight the growing diversity of early anthropoids. Their skeletal remains suggest adaptations for active arboreal life, and their dental formula points to evolutionary branching that may link them to New World monkeys. Yes, that connection is still debated, but it opens fascinating discussions about primate movements across continents and the possibility of ancient dispersal events. As we move through this evolutionary landscape, the propliopithecids take center stage. Egyptopithecus, one of the most famous members of this group, shows many traits that align with the ancestors of Old World monkeys and apes. Its larger body size, more complex skull architecture, and 2-1-2-3 dental formula place it firmly among early Catarrhines. When you picture this animal moving through the treetops, heavier than earlier forms, slower but more robust, you start to see the groundwork for later hominoids and cercopithecoids. You might wonder how all these pieces fit together. Think of the basal anthropoids and early Catarrhines as a branching network shaped by climate, geography, and ecological opportunity. Asia provided some of the earliest small-bodied forms. The Fayum Basin offered stable, lush environments where primates could diversify into multiple lineages. What unites these groups is not a single trait, but a trajectory, an evolutionary movement toward larger brains, more complex social structures, and adaptations that would support life in increasingly varied habitats. So, as we wrap up this part of the story, remember that anthropoid origins are not defined by one fossil or one region. They are a mosaic of forms, each contributing something to the larger picture. These early primates set the stage for the rise of monkeys and apes, and ultimately, they open the door to understanding our own deep evolutionary past. Let's revisit what makes the origin of New World monkeys such a fascinating chapter in primate evolution. When we think of Platyrrhines, those primates living in Central and South America today, We often picture their wide noses, prehensile tails, and remarkable agility. But the deeper question is, how did their ancestors get to the New World in the first place? The answer isn't straightforward, and that's what makes this story so engaging. Let's look at the fossil evidence. One of the earliest possible Platyrrhines is Perupithecus, dated to around 36 million years ago. Its presence in South America suggests that primates were already established there earlier than once believed. Another important fossil, Branizella from Bolivia, appears around 26 million years ago and gives us a clearer picture of early New World monkeys. These fossils tell us two things. Primates reached South America surprisingly early, and once they arrived, they diversified into the rich variety of species we see today. South America was an island continent during this period. It wasn't connected to Africa or North America, which means primates couldn't simply walk across land bridges. So how did they arrive? You might wonder whether this is where imagination overtakes evidence, but the rafting hypothesis, where small primates crossed the Atlantic on mats of vegetation, is currently the most widely supported explanation. Ocean currents, continental positions, and the smaller distance between Africa and South America at the time all make this scenario plausible. It doesn't require large populations making the journey, just a few individuals who survived the crossing and established a founding population. Think about what this means for understanding primate evolution. A rare, chance event could have shaped an entire radiation of primates, giving rise to lineages that developed independently from their Old World relatives. Once in South America, these early Platyrrhines adapted to new environments, from dense forests to open canopies, experimenting with diets, locomotion, and social systems. As we move forward, keep in mind that Platyrrhine origins remind us of how dynamic evolution can be. Geography, climate, and even improbable journeys all play a role in shaping the primate tree. The presence of early fossils like Perupithecus and Branizella anchors this story in evidence, but the broader narrative, how primates crossed oceans and flourished, shows the remarkable resilience and adaptability of early anthropoids. Let's revisit where we are in the primate timeline. By the late Oligocene and early Miocene, anthropoids had already diversified into several lineages across Africa and parts of Eurasia. What we're looking at now is a major branching event, the split between the ancestors of Old World monkeys and the ancestors of apes. You might wonder why this divergence matters so much. It's because the anatomical and ecological directions taken by these two groups lay the foundation for everything that follows in primate and human evolution. Let's look at the evidence we have. One of the most important discoveries comes from the Rukwa Rift Basin in Tanzania, where fossils dated to around 25 million years ago reveal two early forms: Nsungwapithecus, an early cercopithecoid, and Rukwapithecus, an early hominoid. These two animals lived in the same time period, and their coexistence provides a snapshot of the moment when the lineages that would become monkeys and apes began to diverge. Their distinct anatomical traits show that the split was already well underway. Even though these fossils are fragmentary, their dental and cranial features give us enough information to identify them confidently as being on separate evolutionary paths. Think about what this means for reconstructing primate history. Before these finds, our understanding of the divergence was based mostly on later fossils and molecular estimates. The Rukwa discoveries anchor the split in time and place, giving us tangible evidence of early hominoids and early cercopithecoids appearing side by side. This coexistence suggests that these groups began occupying different ecological niches, setting the stage for the specialization we see later in the Miocene, monkeys developing bilophodont molars for more efficient leaf and seed eating, and apes evolving Y5 molars and more flexible shoulder joints suited for climbers and suspensory feeders. You might wonder what drove this divergence. Climate and environment played enormous roles. As Africa's forests shifted and opened during the early Miocene, primates faced new challenges and opportunities. Some lineages adapted to more terrestrial or mixed environments, while others remained in dense forests. These ecological pressures would have encouraged differentiation in diet, locomotion, and social behavior. The divergence wasn't a sudden event, but a gradual accumulation of changes shaped by shifting landscapes. As we follow this trajectory into the rest of the Miocene, we see hominoids spreading into Europe and Asia, diversifying into forms like Proconsul, Dryopithecus, and Civipithecus. Meanwhile, monkeys underwent their own radiation, eventually becoming the most numerous and diverse primate group in many regions. So as we close this segment, keep in mind that the split between monkeys and apes is not just a taxonomic marker. It represents a profound evolutionary branching that created two very different pathways, one leading to the agile, adaptable monkeys that dominate much of today's primate world, and the other leading ultimately to the great apes, and eventually to us. First, let's revisit the journey we took through this section. We began with the earliest hints of anthropoid origins, small-bodied forms like eosimias, whose tiny jaws and agile limbs revealed the first steps toward a new primate direction. From there, we moved into the Fayum Basin, where a rich tapestry of Oligocene species allowed us to track the gradual emergence of early Catarrhines. You might wonder why we spend so much time on these fossils, many of which come from only a few teeth or fragments of bone. The answer is that these fragments capture pivotal moments when primate evolution was branching, experimenting, and refining traits that would shape millions of years of later diversity. Now, this part is important. The diversification of anthropoids was not a single event, but a series of transitions influenced by shifting climates, geographic movements, and ecological pressures. The parapithecids, oligopithecids, and propleopithecids each represent different evolutionary possibilities, and their coexistence reminds us that evolutionary history is not a straight path, but a crowded intersection of lineages. When we finally arrive at the divergence between early monkeys and apes, as recorded in fossils like Nsungwapithecus and Rukwapithecus, we see the beginnings of two trajectories that would dominate the rest of primate evolution. So, as we move into the next section, think about anthropoid origins as a story of increasing complexity. These early lineages set the stage for the Miocene radiation of apes and the global success of monkeys. Their legacy continues in every primate alive today, including us. Thank you for joining this lecture. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. I hope this session deepened your understanding of biological anthropology. Keep exploring what it means to be human. See you soon.